Daniel never planned to lie about his life. At least, not at first. For a long time he believed that honesty was enough. That if he showed up as he was, the right person would eventually stay. That belief lasted exactly until the moment he realized how quickly people stopped listening once they knew how much money he had. It was never immediate. It never looked obvious. It always started the same way: curiosity, polite interest, a shift in posture that was almost imperceptible. But Daniel had learned to notice it. The moment when questions stopped being about who he was and started being about what he owned. He hated that moment. Not because he was ashamed of his success, but because it erased everything else. His failures, his loneliness, the years he had spent raising a child alone after his wife left. None of that mattered. Once people decided his life was easy, so slowly, without announcing it even to himself, Daniel stopped telling the truth. Not all of it, just the parts that changed how people looked at him. On blind dates, he began saying he was struggling financially, that work had been unstable, that life felt uncertain. He never exaggerated. He never pretended to be desperate. He simply presented a version of himself that didn't come with privilege attached. And then he watched. Most dates ended quickly after that. Some women smiled politely and made excuses. Others tried to be kind, offering advice he never asked for. A few stayed longer, but their interest had already faded. Daniel didn't take it personally. He understood something important. People don't leave because someone is poor. They leave because they don't want uncertainty. After the 5th failed date, he stopped being surprised. After the 7th, he stopped caring. Or at least, he thought he did. The cafe wasn't special. That was why he liked it. No marble counters, no curated playlists, no people pretending to be somewhere else. Just small tables, tired workers, and a steady rhythm that didn't ask questions. Daniel arrived early, as he always did, and chose a booth near the window. He wore the same jacket he wore on every date, clean, but worn enough to look forgettable. Nothing about him stood out. That was intentional. The blind date was supposed to arrive at 7. At 7:15, he already knew she wouldn't. He didn't feel disappointed, just tired. That was when Livia noticed him. Not because he looked interesting, but because he looked familiar in a way that had nothing to do with his face. He had the posture of someone who carried responsibility quietly. Someone who didn't demand attention but expected very little in return. She approached with a notepad in her hand. "Coffee?" she asked. "Black?" he replied. She nodded and walked away. That should have been the end of it. But when she returned, she looked at him again. "You look like someone who doesn't sleep much," she said casually, as if commenting on the weather. Daniel almost smiled. Most people never noticed exhaustion unless it inconvenienced them. "Yeah," he said. "That's fair." She placed the cup down and lingered for a second, longer than necessary. "Long day?" she asked. "Long few years," he replied before thinking about it. She didn't laugh. She didn't ask follow-up questions. She simply nodded, as if that answer made sense. That was new. When the woman from the blind date cancelled, a short text, no explanation, Daniel stayed where he was. He didn't order anything else. He didn't check his phone. He just sat there. Livia returned to clear the table. "No show?" she asked. "Didn't even start," he said. She hesitated, then smiled slightly. "Well," she said, "at least you didn't waste good coffee." He chuckled quietly. Something about the simplicity of that comment stayed with him. They didn't start a conversation. Not formally. It happened in pieces. A sentence here, a comment there. between customers, between responsibilities. Daniel learned her name, Livia. She learned his, Daniel. No last names, no titles, no context that could complicate things. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt something unfamiliar. Ease. When her shift ended, she didn't rush out. She wiped the counter slowly, stretching time. Then she looked at him. "If you're still here," she said, "I get off in a few minutes." There was no flirtation in her voice, no expectation, just an offer. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. They walked instead of sitting. The city at night felt quieter away from the main streets. Livia talked about work, not complaining, just explaining. Daniel talked about his son, how raising him alone had changed his sense of time, how everything felt heavier, but also clearer. She listened, really listened, not like someone waiting for their turn to speak. When he mentioned money struggles, she didn't react, didn't offer solutions, didn't judge. She accepted it, and acceptance unsettled him more than rejection ever had. By the end of the night, Daniel realized something dangerous. He liked who he was around her. Not the successful version, not the guarded version, just the man who was tired and trying, and she believed that was all he was. That night, lying in bed, Daniel stared at the ceiling and made a quiet decision. He wouldn't tell her, not yet. Not because he wanted to deceive her, but because he was afraid of losing something that hadn't even fully formed. He told himself it was temporary, that he would explain later. That timing mattered. What Daniel didn't realize was this. Every day he stayed silent. The lie stopped being protection and started becoming the foundation. Daniel didn't tell Livia the truth the next day, or the day after that. At first, it didn't feel like a decision. It felt like postponement, like something that could still be corrected if handled carefully enough. He told himself that timing mattered, that honesty without trust was just noise, and that trust needed time. What he didn't admit was that he was afraid. Afraid not of her reaction, but of how quickly everything good seemed to disappear whenever the truth entered the room. They began seeing each other regularly, not because they planned it, but because it felt natural. Daniel started stopping by the cafe, even when he wasn't hungry. Sometimes he didn't even sit down. He'd stand near the counter, exchange a few words with her, then leave. Those moments mattered more to him than he wanted to admit. Livia noticed, of course. She noticed everything, but she didn't comment on it. She didn't tease him or question his intentions. She simply made space for him, the way people do when they're not trying to control outcomes. That restraint made him feel safe. Their conversations deepened slowly, not dramatically. They talked about exhaustion, about how adulthood seemed to be a series of responsibilities that no one prepared you for, about the strange guilt of wanting more while already feeling overwhelmed. Daniel talked about his son often, not in a performative way, just as a fact of his life. Livia listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that surprised him with their precision. She didn't ask how much things cost. She asked how he managed. That difference mattered. He noticed how careful she was with money without being bitter about it, how she counted before ordering, how she planned days in advance just to make sure nothing collapsed unexpectedly. There was no resentment in it, just discipline shaped by necessity. Daniel admired that. He had known discipline too, but from a different place. From ambition, not survival. From strategy, not scarcity. Seeing it in her made him uncomfortable in ways he couldn't fully explain. As weeks passed, their time together expanded beyond the cafe. Walks replaced dinners. Simple routines replaced excitement. Daniel realized something unsettling. He was happier doing less, as long as it was with her. He stopped thinking about impressing her. He started thinking about staying. One evening, after a long shift, Livia sat across from him on a bench near the cafe. The city moved around them, indifferent. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "You ever feel like you're always holding things together?" she asked quietly. "And if you let go for even a second, everything falls apart?" Daniel nodded without hesitation. "All the time," he said. That answer wasn't a lie. She didn't dramatize her life for him. She didn't list her struggles as proof of strength. She mentioned things casually: rent increases, unpredictable schedules, family members who needed help more often than they gave it. Daniel listened, feeling a growing weight in his chest. Not because he felt responsible, but because he felt dishonest. He started making small adjustments to maintain the illusion. Nothing obvious. Nothing that felt like deception in the moment. He stopped driving his own car near her neighborhood. He avoided certain conversations. He became more conscious of how easily he spoke about figuring things out. What once felt like a harmless test was becoming an active performance. And performances require attention. Livia invited him to her apartment one night. It was modest, clean, carefully maintained. Every object seemed chosen for function rather than decoration. Daniel noticed the lack of excess immediately. The way space was respected, he felt like an intruder. Not because he didn't belong there, but because his presence was built on a mission. They sat together in silence for a while. Not awkward silence, comfortable silence. The kind that suggests trust without demanding reassurance. Livia rested her head back against the couch and closed her eyes. "You know what I like about you," she said softly. Daniel waited. "You don't pretend to have everything figured out." The words landed heavily. Because that was exactly what he was doing. He thought about telling her then. He even opened his mouth, but fear intervened. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet voice reminding him how fragile this felt, how easily it could vanish. So he stayed silent. Again. When Livia met Daniel's son for the first time, something shifted irreversibly. She didn't try to win him over. She didn't overperform kindness. She spoke to him the way adults speak to children when they respect them, with clarity, patience, and interest. Daniel watched from a distance, realizing that this was no longer just about him. His son liked her, not because she entertained him, but because she stayed present. That night, after his son went to sleep, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table, longer than usual. The house felt different, more occupied, more vulnerable. For the first time, the lie felt dangerous, not morally, practically. Livia began noticing inconsistencies, though she didn't name them as such. Just feelings, subtle discomforts. Daniel never seemed stressed in the ways people with unstable finances usually are. He didn't panic. He didn't avoid bills with the same anxiety she did. He was calm, too calm. One evening she asked him something simple. "Are you actually struggling?" she said. "Or are you just tired?" Daniel smiled. "Tired," he replied. That was still true. Just incomplete. What he didn't know was that Livia was beginning to protect herself emotionally. Not by pulling away, but by preparing. She had learned that hope without caution could be cruel. She didn't accuse him. She didn't investigate, but she watched more closely. Daniel, meanwhile, felt the lie grow heavier. What had started as a shield was now a weight. Every moment of intimacy required calculation. Every future conversation carried risk. He was no longer lying to be accepted. He was lying to delay loss. And delay, he would soon learn, doesn't prevent impact. It only increases it. Livia had learned, long before Daniel entered her life, that people rarely wanted the full truth. They wanted summaries, versions that fit neatly into conversation, stories that didn't linger too long or ask too much. So she learned to edit herself, not because she was ashamed, but because experience had taught her that honesty without limits often turned into burden. Her life had never collapsed all at once. It eroded, slowly, quietly. One missed opportunity followed by another. One promise delayed. One plan postponed until it no longer made sense to try again. She didn't grow up dreaming of luxury. She dreamed of predictability, of knowing where she would sleep next month, of opening the fridge without calculating how long things needed to last. Those dreams never felt dramatic enough to talk about, but they shaped everything. Her apartment reflected that mindset. Nothing excessive, nothing sentimental displayed openly. Objects existed because they served a purpose. Even memories were stored carefully, out of sight, where they couldn't distract her from surviving the present. Every bill was paid the moment she could afford it. Every problem was addressed before it had the chance to grow teeth. That discipline wasn't admirable, it was necessary. Work at the cafe, wasn't it just a job? It was structure. It told her when to wake up, when to move, when to smile. It gave shape to days that otherwise threatened to blur together. She didn't resent it. Resentment wasted energy. She saved her energy for staying afloat. People often assumed she wanted more, a better job, a different life, a dramatic change. But what Livia wanted was simpler and harder to explain. She wanted stability that didn't disappear the moment something went wrong. She wanted a partner who didn't treat hardship like a temporary inconvenience. She wanted someone who wouldn't leave once reality stopped being charming. That was why Daniel unsettled her, not because he seemed impressive, but because he seemed steady in a way she didn't understand. He listened without impatience. He didn't rush to fix things. He didn't treat her struggles like obstacles to overcome for his own comfort. That was rare, and rarity creates attachment. At the same time, Livia noticed something else. Daniel never talked about fear the way she did. His exhaustion was real, but it wasn't sharp. It didn't have the edge of panic she recognized in herself. He was tired, yes, but not threatened. She didn't know how to articulate that difference. She just felt it. She began catching herself imagining a future. Not weddings or houses or shared accounts, smaller things. Shared routines, consistency. Someone staying, even when nothing exciting was happening. Those thoughts scared her, because expectation, once allowed, becomes vulnerable. Daniel saw pieces of her life slowly, never all at once. He noticed how she hesitated before buying small things, how she double-checked plans, how she prepared for disappointment before it arrived. He told himself it was caution, but he sensed something deeper, something shaped by years of being let down quietly. One night, after a particularly long shift, Livia sat alone in her apartment with the lights off. Not crying, just breathing. Her body felt heavy in a way sleep wouldn't fix. Daniel noticed immediately when he arrived. He didn't ask what was wrong. He sat beside her. That was it. No advice, no reassurance, no optimism, just presence. That moment stayed with her longer than any compliment ever had, because presence didn't promise anything, it just stayed. But even as trust grew, Livia remained careful. She didn't merge her life with his. She didn't assume permanence. She didn't stop preparing for disappointment. That preparation wasn't pessimism, it was self-defense. She began to notice details she hadn't before. Daniel never seemed worried about emergencies. Unexpected expenses didn't alter his mood. He talked about uncertainty, but his body didn't respond to it the way hers did. There was no accusation in these observations, just awareness. One evening, walking home together, she said something without realizing its weight. "I don't need someone rich," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her. "I know," he replied. She stopped walking. "I need someone who stays," she added. That was the closest she had come to stating a boundary out loud. Daniel heard it as a confession. She meant it as a condition. From that moment on, Livia became more emotionally invested than she wanted to admit. She introduced Daniel to parts of her life she usually kept separate: friends, habits, small routines that mattered more than big gestures. She did this cautiously, but she did it. And that was where the danger lived, because Livia didn't forgive deception easily. Not because she was rigid, but because she had learned how expensive misplaced trust could be. She had been abandoned before, not dramatically, quietly, by people who promised stability and delivered uncertainty instead. She survived that by becoming precise about who she let close. Daniel sensed this intuitively. He felt the narrowing window. Every moment of closeness came with a ticking awareness that truth was being delayed. The lie no longer felt like protection, it felt like theft. Livia didn't confront him. She didn't search for proof. She didn't want to be right. But something inside her began to brace for impact. Trust, she knew, doesn't break when truth appears. It breaks when truth arrives too late. Daniel had always believed that lies only became dangerous when they were discovered. What he hadn't understood was that lies begin to rot long before that moment. They rot quietly, altering behavior, shifting tone, changing the way a person listens and responds. By the time they are exposed, most of the damage has already been done. Daniel was living inside that damage now. The first thing that changed was his awareness. Every conversation began to feel heavier. Not because Livia was suspicious, but because he was. He replayed her questions after they were asked, searching for meaning that wasn't there yet. He prepared answers to things she hadn't said. He was no longer present. He was vigilant. Livia felt it too, not as fear, but as distance. Daniel still showed up, still listened, still cared. But something in him had tightened. His responses felt measured in a way they hadn't before. He paused longer. He chose words more carefully. She didn't accuse him of anything, she simply noticed. The world outside their relationship began pressing in. It started with an old acquaintance of Daniel's, someone from a version of his life Livia had never seen. The encounter was brief, almost forgettable. A smile on the street. A comment about how things were going at the company. Daniel corrected it quickly. Too quickly. Livia caught the tension in his voice before she caught the words themselves. She didn't ask questions then, but she remembered. Later that evening, alone in her apartment, Livia thought about how easily people slipped into roles without realizing it. How often explanations came pre-packaged. How familiarity could hide complexity. She didn't want to investigate Daniel. She didn't want to uncover something ugly, but uncertainty has a way of demanding attention. Daniel, meanwhile, felt his control slipping. Not because Livia was confronting him, but because she was trusting him. That trust felt heavier than suspicion would have. He knew that once trust turned into disappointment, there would be no argument to win. His son began asking questions, innocent ones, questions children ask when they sense inconsistency but lack language for it. Why did they never go to certain places anymore? Why did his father sometimes borrow cars? Why did adults speak differently around him? Daniel answered carefully, but every answer added another layer to the lie. One night, Livia asked something simple. Not about money, not about work. "Do you trust me?" she said. The question startled him. "Yes," he answered immediately. That was the truth. "Then why?" she continued softly. "Do I feel like there's always something you're holding back?" The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was long, too long. Daniel smiled eventually, but the smile felt practiced. "Everyone has parts of their life they don't know how to explain," he said. Livia nodded. She didn't argue, but something inside her closed slightly. After that conversation, Daniel stopped sleeping well, not because he feared losing Livia, but because he realized something worse. He was losing the opportunity to tell the truth on his own terms. Every day that passed made the eventual revelation more humiliating, more damaging, more personal. The lie was no longer passive, it was active. Livia began protecting herself in small ways. She stopped imagining the future. She avoided merging routines. She kept emotional distance without withdrawing physically. This wasn't punishment, it was instinct. She had learned that emotional safety often depended on timing, on knowing when to step back before a fall. Daniel noticed the shift, not in words, in tone. In how she listened with just a bit more reserve. In how she stopped leaning forward during conversations. These were subtle changes, but Daniel noticed them because guilt sharpens perception. He considered telling her the truth dozens of times. Every time, fear intervened. Fear of looking manipulative. Fear of looking dishonest. Fear of confirming her worst suspicions. Ironically, those fears were already becoming reality. The lie began to change the way Daniel saw himself. He wasn't pretending to be poor anymore. He was pretending to be honest. And that realization unsettled him more than any potential breakup. Livia didn't need proof. She didn't need evidence. What she felt was enough. Something fundamental wasn't aligned, and alignment mattered more to her than affection. One evening, as they walked together in silence, she stopped and looked at him. "Daniel," she said calmly, "if there's something important you haven't told me, I'd rather know than imagine it." He opened his mouth, closed it, then said nothing. That moment stayed with her, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. Daniel watched her walk away that night with the quiet certainty that something had crossed a threshold. The lie had reached its limit, not because it was exposed, but because it was no longer sustainable. Truth, he realized too late, doesn't demand perfection. It demands timing. And timing had already been compromised. The truth didn't come out because Daniel decided the time was right. It came out because the lie could no longer hold its shape. There is a moment in every deception when silence stops feeling like protection and starts feeling like pressure. Daniel had crossed that moment days ago. He felt it in his chest, in the way his thoughts raced before every conversation, in the constant calculation that had replaced ease. By the time Livia finally asked him to sit down, the outcome was already set. They were in her apartment. The same small space where comfort had once lived easily between them. That night it felt smaller, not because the room had changed, but because honesty has a way of compressing space. There was nowhere to hide, no distance to create safety. Daniel noticed details he had never paid attention to before. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint crack in the wall near the window, the way Livia crossed her arms, not defensively, but protectively. She wasn't preparing to attack, she was preparing to understand. "I need you to tell me something," she said calmly. Not carefully, not partially, just honestly. Daniel sat down slowly. This wasn't an ambush that made it worse. He considered, one last time, giving her a softened version of the truth. A narrative that explained his fear, his past disappointments, his reasons. He had practiced those words internally so many times, they felt ready. But something in her expression stopped him. She wasn't asking for a story. She was asking for reality. So he told her, not in fragments, not strategically. He told her about the money, the businesses, the deliberate choice to present himself as struggling, the dates. The test he never called a test, but always was. He spoke slowly, without interruption, without justification. Livia listened without reacting. That silence unsettled him more than anger would have. She didn't look surprised, she looked confirmed. When he finished, she didn't respond right away. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. The lights outside were steady, indifferent. Life continued at the same pace it always had. After a long moment she spoke. "So the version of you I fell in love with," she said quietly, "was incomplete by design." Daniel opened his mouth to respond. She raised her hand. "Please don't explain," she added. "I understand why. That's not the part I'm struggling with." She turned to face him. Her voice didn't shake. "That wasn't honesty," she said. "That was control." The word landed heavily. Control, not manipulation, not cruelty. Control. Daniel felt something collapse inside him. Because she was right. He hadn't trusted her with the truth, and then waited to see if she stayed. He had decided what information she could handle, and built the relationship around that decision. He had written the rules without telling her there were rules. "You let me believe I was choosing you," Livia continued. "That I was choosing a life knowing its limits." Her eyes met his. "But you had already decided those limits for me." She wasn't angry. That was the hardest part. Anger would have implied negotiation. This was clarity. Daniel tried to speak, not to defend himself, but to express regret. But regret arrived too late to change the shape of the moment. "I never cared about the money," Livia said. "You know that." He nodded. "I cared about knowing who I was standing next to," she continued. "And now I don't." That sentence marked the end. Not dramatically, definitively. She asked him to leave. Not immediately, not harshly, just clearly. "I need space," she said, "and I need it without promises." Daniel stood up. He looked around the apartment, the couch where they had shared quiet nights, the table where they had planned small, fragile hopes. Everything looked the same. Nothing was. When he reached the door, he turned back once. Livia didn't look up. She was sitting on the couch, hands folded, breathing slowly. Not broken, processing. The door closed softly behind him. There was no final word. No dramatic exit, just absence. Daniel walked for a long time that night. Not because he didn't know where to go, but because stopping meant accepting what had happened. The lie hadn't failed because it was discovered. It had failed because it had shaped the relationship in a way that could never be undone. Livia stayed awake long after he left, not replaying his words, replaying her own choices. She didn't feel foolish for trusting him. She felt robbed of the chance to trust him fully. That difference mattered. What hurt wasn't losing Daniel. What hurt was realizing that the version of intimacy she thought she had experienced had been filtered, curated, managed. Trust, she knew, doesn't break because of wealth or status. It breaks when one person decides they know better than the other what truth they can handle. And that night, both of them understood something painful and irreversible. Some relationships don't end because love disappears. They end because honesty arrives too late to save it. The truth didn't explode when Daniel finally told it. It collapsed, quietly, like something that had been hollow for too long. After that last conversation, there were no dramatic confrontations, no raised voices, no public scenes. Livia didn't demand explanations, and Daniel didn't offer excuses. The silence between them had already done the work that words usually do. They didn't stop seeing each other immediately, but they stopped pretending everything was fine, and that difference mattered. When the truth finally came out, fully, without strategy, without framing, it sounded smaller than Daniel expected. Not because it was insignificant, but because lies always feel larger in imagination than in confession. He told her about the money, about the companies, about the choice to present himself as struggling. He didn't justify it this time. He didn't explain it as protection or trauma. He simply stated it. Livia listened, not with shock, with recognition, as if something she had already felt was finally given shape. She didn't cry. She didn't accuse. She sat still, absorbing the weight of what it meant. Not that he was rich, but that he had decided, on his own, which version of himself she was allowed to know. "I wasn't choosing you," she said eventually, her voice calm but firm. "I was choosing a story you wrote without me." That sentence stayed with Daniel longer than anything else she said. She asked him to leave that night, not out of anger, out of clarity. She needed space to understand what part of the relationship had been real and what part had been managed. Daniel didn't argue. For the first time, he didn't try to control the outcome. He left. The days that followed were heavier than the confrontation itself. Without the tension of secrecy, Daniel felt exposed in a new way. His life returned to its usual rhythm, meetings, decisions, money moving in predictable directions. But something fundamental was missing. He had told. After Daniel left that night, nothing dramatic happened. No messages, no apologies sent too soon. No late-night attempts to repair what had already fractured. And that silence, more than any argument, confirmed that something real had ended. Daniel returned to the life he had always known how to manage. Meetings resumed. Decisions were made. Money moved the way it always had. From the outside, nothing had changed. From the inside, everything felt misaligned. He noticed it first, in small moments. When he caught himself wanting to share something trivial with Livia and realized there was no place for it anymore. When a problem arose that he could solve easily and the solution brought no satisfaction. When his phone stayed silent at night, not because no one cared, but because the person who mattered most was no longer there. Loss, he learned, doesn't always arrive as pain. Sometimes it arrives as emptiness. Daniel began questioning things he had never questioned before. Not his success, not his intelligence, but his instincts. The same instincts that had told him lying was safer than being seen. He realized that every time he had tested someone before trusting them, he had already decided they were untrustworthy. That realization unsettled him deeply. Meanwhile, Livia moved forward in the only way she knew how. Routinely, carefully, without dramatizing what had happened. She returned to the cafe, took extra shifts, maintained her discipline. To anyone watching, she looked unchanged. But internally, she was reorganizing. She wasn't heartbroken in the way people expect heartbreak to look. She wasn't crying in public or replaying memories obsessively. She was recalibrating her boundaries. That process was quieter and far more exhausting. At night, she revisited moments she had trusted, not to punish herself, but to understand where intuition had whispered and been ignored. She didn't regret loving Daniel. She regretted not insisting on clarity sooner. What hurt most wasn't the lie itself. It was the realization that someone she trusted had decided, without consulting her, what she could handle. That kind of decision stayed with her. Daniel tried therapy for the first time in his life, not because he felt broken, but because he felt exposed. The sessions weren't about money or relationships at first. They were about control, about how control can masquerade as care, about how fear, when unexamined, becomes architecture. That word stayed with him, architecture, because that's what he had built his relationships on. He stopped pretending to be someone else, not because he planned to date again, but because pretending no longer felt protective. It felt dishonest, and dishonesty now came with a cost he finally understood. Weeks passed, then months. Not in dramatic transformation, but in quiet recalibration. Livia noticed changes in herself too. She became less tolerant of ambiguity, less willing to accept half answers. She stopped assuming good intentions were enough. This didn't make her harder, it made her clearer. Occasionally, Daniel crossed her mind, not with longing, with reflection. She wondered whether he understood what had actually been lost. Not the relationship, the chance to be known without conditions. One afternoon, their paths crossed unexpectedly. Not in a dramatic setting, just a familiar street. They stopped, not out of obligation, out of recognition. They didn't talk long, they didn't need to. Daniel looked different, not poorer, not richer, but quieter, more grounded. Livia noticed, and that mattered. "I hope you're well," he said. "I am," she replied. And for the first time, it wasn't something she said out of politeness. They walked away without promises, without closure speeches, without rewriting the past. That restraint mattered more than reconciliation would have, because not every story needs to end with people together. Some stories end with people changed. Daniel continued living honestly, not because it guaranteed love, but because it guaranteed alignment. Livia continued demanding clarity, not because she distrusted people, but because she trusted herself. And somewhere between loss and understanding, both of them learned the same truth from opposite sides. Love doesn't fail because of money. It fails when fear is allowed to make decisions in silence. Time did what it always does. It moved forward. Not with announcements, not with closure ceremonies. Just forward. And slowly the sharp edges of the story soft, not because the truth changed, but because understanding grew around it. Daniel never became poorer. Livia never became richer. That had never been the point. What changed was quieter and far more difficult to measure. Daniel learned how often he had confused fear with wisdom. He had believed that testing people protected him from disappointment, that withholding truth gave him control over outcomes. But over time, he began to see the pattern clearly. Every test was a wall, and every wall guaranteed distance. He hadn't been protecting his heart. He had been isolating it. He stopped measuring people by how they reacted to information. He started paying attention to how they stayed. That shift changed the way he lived, not just the way he loved. Livia learned something too, not about Daniel, but about herself. She learned that intuition doesn't shout, it whispers. And that the moments she had felt unease were not signs of insecurity, but signals asking to be heard sooner. She stopped apologizing for wanting clarity. She stopped negotiating her boundaries to preserve connection. Neither of them framed the experience as failure. Failure implies wasted effort. This wasn't wasted, it was formative. Their story didn't become a lesson they shared publicly. It became a reference point, a quiet reminder that stayed with them whenever choices felt uncertain. Sometimes Daniel thought about what would have happened if he had told the truth sooner, not with regret, with curiosity, but curiosity no longer demanded answers. Sometimes Livia thought about how easily she had accepted half-truths when they came wrapped in kindness, not with blame, with awareness. They didn't need to forgive each other in dramatic ways. They didn't need to return to each other to validate growth. They had already changed. That was enough. And for anyone watching their story from the outside, the conclusion was simple, but not easy. Love doesn't collapse because of money. It collapses when one person decides they know better than the other what truth they deserve. Some relationships end because people stop caring. Others end because honesty arrives too late to be useful. This one ended because fear was allowed to speak first, but something meaningful survived. Not romance. Understanding. Daniel learns that being known is riskier than being admired, but infinitely more honest. Livia learned that choosing clarity early is kinder than choosing comfort late. And together, though no longer side by side, they proved something most stories avoid admitting. Not every ending needs reunion. Some endings exist to restore dignity.